This media is brought to you by Polyscope.
In the realm of tomorrow, where techniques mind, we ponder, we dream.
So thank you so much for coming on the show. It's great to finally meet you because this is how we meet each other nowadays, over Zoom. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and your organization and what you're passionate about?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's great. It's been a long time coming for this conversation. I think when we first chatted, so first of all, I'm Sam Rad. I'm a futurist, anthropologist, and what I'd say normally like a lifelong student of humanity. So I'm a free agent. I don't necessarily have an organization or agenda.
Or an
Certainly
organization
not.
of one. An organization of one.
I am the future, which is solo, not even solopreneur. I'm just a solo person. No, but so I mean, we had talked about my most recent book, which is called Radical Next, Reclaiming Your Humanity in a Post-Human World.
Mm.
And I mean, obviously, I did a lot of things in the past. I've been involved in a number of different organizations early across the spectrum of, I'd say, 3 AI companies before, it was machine learning at the time. It wasn't really like a buzzword. And then kind of stumbled my way into decentralized infrastructure and blockchain ecosystems quite early and kind of invented some stuff. So I did used to do things as an entrepreneur with organizations, and have found that really I'd say my passion and my purpose has been through storytelling or really empowering people to see what's to come. So, I didn't necessarily give myself the title of a futurist. So it seems these days a lot of people are.
Oh yeah.
I'm like,
we're all futurists in a way.
yeah, enter to what are 5 trends into chat GPT, and certainly you are a futurist now.
Yeah.
No, mine was sort of like, I should call myself the accidental futurist or habitually too early or very punctual.
I know. I hate when that happens. I hate when that happens. But that's the biggest problem that startup founders have. I think they have, unless if something's already out there and they're just copying what's already out there, then they're on time. But if they're inventing something new that's never been done before, they're too early. And there's so many of us that are too early.
Right. I mean, I would have been better suited in like innovation department of kind of like, toiling by myself in some basement somewhere, for a company as opposed to what we were building. We're definitely, 10, 15 years ahead. But I just couldn't, I'm not the kind of person that would have been able to play the game of like the Uber for XYZ. So I could have
I remember those times.
Yeah, I know
Good
the
times.
platform models. I feel like I could have probably been a bit more successful. But I mean, in that now, I guess for anyone who's tuning in, I am a futurist, and my background is not necessarily conventional in terms of, I'd say like the path to get there. I was trained as an anthropologist, or like I said, like to say, a professional people watcher. So I got quite good at just really, I wouldn't even say studying people, just being a human. And I was self-taught as an engineer, self-taught in kind of the tech side of things, and started tech companies. But, I've always had this tension with, am I building it? Do I build it to try to solve problems, or do I study it in a critical lens? And I kind of go back and forth. And what I've found recently is, again, I think I'm kind of comfortably placed in the student of humanity side, especially as we need it more, right? Like the big questions that we're facing, it's not just about, these existential or ontological questions of like, will AI take my job, or, replace this or that, which was sort of the past couple of years of fear. But it's, what does it mean to be a human? Very deeply philosophical or even metaphysical concepts tend to arise in human societies during big shifts like this.
Yeah.
And, that's where I'm spending most of my time.
Which is, of course, in the future, because right now most people just care about, will AI take my job? So you're already ahead of yourself.
I mean, I might have always been ahead of myself like this. I have this problem of making myself redundant
Yeah.
intentionally. Like it's sort of like if you want to be even a business leader, right? You should be replaceable. You should make a resilient organization
Oh, yeah.
that's not reliant on any one individual. And I've been a long proponent of decentralization as a concept, not just infrastructure.
Right.
But, for sure, even as like a speaker, public speaker, writer, someone who does stuff like this, I started a project in 2009 to deepfake myself. And I would always revisit
Again,
it.
you're very early.
2009, I know. And then I revisited it in 2020 because it was brought on to be the CEO of an kind of AI-driven video communication platform. So we were working across all of these different tools or building them. Anything from speech to text, text to speech, doing video models, avatars, all these filtering things that we're now seeing actually happen. And so I was like building this stuff to the point that I built a pretty high fidelity version of what I call Sam Rad AI. And this was, no one had really done this unless you were like LucasArts for $10 million.
Yeah.
It was like I showed some people and they're like, wait, who funded this? And I was like, oh, this is just, me and our engineering team.
I bet you it was really good too. It was really good, I'm sure.
It was uncanny. Yeah, it was one of these things where I freaked out. I actually had a bit of an existential crisis myself to see it and to see where it was going. And this is again 2020. The world is also in a precarious circumstance, to say the least.
Right.
And so at that point in time, it's like I had the shock. I'm like, I don't know if I want to build this and contribute this to society. And then I did end up reflecting for quite a bit and coming back to not like share what I see. I don't think it's necessarily the role of a futurist or anyone with foresight to necessarily bestow upon people without their permission some sort of prophecy or something. It's not, it's not like woo. I mean, it certainly makes.
But you put it out into the world, and it's already there. It's there. Successive generations will find it, and they'll go, "My God, see what she did."
They will, yeah, but I don't talk about it, and it's more. I prefer to equip people with the skills or the tools or the mindsets or the ideas that what will be useful in the future without necessarily needing to tell people like, here's what is going to happen and here's how the dismantling of society will look and it'll be messy, but we're building up this way. Like that's
it'll
not
get better.
fun.
It'll get better.
I believe. I mean, yeah.
How did you fall into tech from being in anthropology? Because
my goodness. So I was a bit of an unruly anthropologist. I actually started in neuroscience and I was like in class and I went to a pretty small liberal arts school, but this was undergrad. And I was like in the back of the class hacking my computer to play Mario Kart. And I was like, okay, I always did like kind of a gamer kid. And so I didn't do well and was like, but I still like studying people. And anthropology and ethnography was something that interested me. So when it came time to do my thesis and then consider grad school and the work there, I proposed studying the burgeoning communities of online worlds. Now, at the time, they were like, no. What? No. And so, right? I was like, there's this thing called Facebook, which had just come out. Like, I think it's going to
I want to do what's next. I don't want to do what's now. Come
on. They're like, no, you need to go study people in Papua New Guinea or, what people are still doing.
Wait a minute.
I found something that actually felt the most analogous to if I was sent to some village. And this was a virtual world called Second Life. I don't know if you remember.
I remember it. I remember it very well.
Some people don't, right? I sort of was like, it's definitely a niche thing.
Yeah.
And yeah, I did my ethnography living in Second Life for 6 months.
And that was
Um,
allowed? Papua New
yes,
Guinea, yes. Second Life, yes. But
I got Second Life
Facebook, no.
approved. No, because it was too, there weren't avatars. I think like the department at the time was able to understand like human avatars that do things.
Oh, so
There's
it's like a society. Enough of a
yeah,
society. Okay, gotcha.
right? There's, like an in-world currency and people do all these activities. So that kind of got me, deeply immersed in tech. And meanwhile, I was sitting in class, and it was right at the cusp of this era where we went from analog to digital
Hmm.
in the educational environments. And so I noticed people were starting to bring like laptops and stuff to class, and they were online shopping and killing time. And
Instead of listening to the lecture.
and so I'm like obviously the weirdo that's in back, like watching what they're doing on their screens because
Nice.
I can't help myself. And I talked to a few friends, and I was always having ideas for like projects, plays, businesses, like anything. And I brought a group of people together that summer. Um, my brother was at a different university at the time, and they were all computer science kids. So I was like, let's build an online personal shopping assistant. Like we called her Shop with Stella. She had a
Hmm.
name. She was like a little AI avatar.
Nice.
And
And this
we
was
thought,
like really early on, right?
yeah, yeah, this is around that time, like 2009, 2010. And I mean, I would have built Pandora if I could have. It already existed
Hmm.
for music. And so it was just like kind of, I noticed people were shopping. I don't particularly care so much for fashion, but basically the idea was to map human taste. And we did. And it was honestly meant to be a fun summer project, hacking away in some Brooklyn loft. I filmed the whole thing, being the little burgeoning documentarian I
Nice.
wanted to be.
You're such a polymath. I love it. You do like a little bit of
I'm
everything. It's
just
great.
great. No, I actually just probably always wanted to make documentaries, and it's taken me this long in my career to get there. But so I'm filming this thing, and I'm like thinking I'm making a documentary about like people trying to pave their way in a world post 2008 financial crisis. Like, what will we do? We'll build the future. And someone pitches this to like a major network related to NBC, but one of the more trashy reality TV show ones that I will not name. And it got picked up for a reality show. This was
Oh,
like
nice.
pre-influ no. So there was this whole journey. They were
Any
actually
kind of
were
fame is good fame, right? Any kind of attention is good attention. No? Was it
it
was it not like that in
was
'09? I
well,
mean '08,
so
'09? It
it
was.
it didn't air. I ended up buying the rights, so that's a side journey story. But no, I mean, this was before, again, it was right on the cusp of social media. It was before influencers. They actually were creating the concept, which they called affluencer, like
Yeah.
wealthy
Well, I mean,
of
in
inf
'08, we barely had smartphones, right? We didn't even
right.
have smartphones in '08, right?
I won't say I would have been one of the original affluencer turned influencers, but it was something that they were creating, right? And for me, I had no interest in that. I mean, I can definitely put on a good show, but all of a sudden I was like, wow, we're building a real business. And now there's the
Mm.
potential for, a million eyes when it airs to be on this thing. And so I got really into actually building the business. And that's when I got kind of hands on and did some of the engineering work myself and like upskilled. I was in grad school at the time and also switched into a more technical course of study in addition to sort of my anthropological mindset. So, it was a really interesting beginning to a career. It was quite a long, I wouldn't say too long, but quite a while now at this point in time. But I will say, as I've progressed, because in my earlier years, there was some pressure to be more technical.
Hmm.
And I am quite technical. I became quite technical. I was even a CTO at some point.
Wow.
Um, but I realized like my superpower is again this bridge. And as we move more and more into a world where the technology itself or even the building of the technology is commodified or democratized or decentralized or all these things, the human skills that maybe we might have foregone will be increasingly more important.
Mm.
So
It bounced you back onto the human side of things. So was there a specific event that occurred that made you think, wait a minute, I'm going in the wrong direction. I
yeah,
need to pivot.
every moment I've had, I mean, the whole story has been just like these ups and downs of being like a fly on the wall. I will say a fairy on the wall. I prefer to be a little bit more whimsical, but being in these rooms, I'm sure you as well in Silicon Valley, where you're privy to things that either are occurring or will occur, that most of even the Bay Area is
Oh
5 to 10 years ahead. When I lived there, I would forget that some of these things did not exist outside of,
exactly. Or
you know?
the things that you're building things for yourself, and that's not what you need to do. You can't build things for yourself because it's a very small market. You have to build things for others, and it's almost difficult to get to do that because the bubble is it's a very strong bubble to be in.
Yeah, I remember there was a phase of like these on-demand valet parkers that would like dress in pink. It was like around the time of creating Uber and Lyft, and they would park cars for people downtown
Yeah,
in San
I love
Francisco.
that
And
stuff.
I know, and I was like, you never saw it anywhere else, but
Those
yeah,
things can only exist in the ecosystem here. It's like,
I'm gonna have to come back and live in the future again a little bit, but there was never a specific moment. I suppose there were maybe two, as I had, you know, built a few of these startups, and I'm more of like a 0 to 1 person. So
mhm,
sort of the inception, and would get to the point of the growth stage for the company and yeah, begin asking myself the questions of, is this what I want to contribute to the world or to
right,
society? Or I'd see products or things that I'd help create or even invent used in ways that were not as intended, or perhaps for ways that could even be nefarious, in my opinion.
right,
Um, and that it was a bit demoralizing. Um, But again, I wouldn't say it was necessarily a shift, like going away from something because I was upset by it. It was more that I felt a stronger alignment towards, on one hand, having this responsibility to either know or foresee or to be building all of this super cool technology for the future, and also being involved in organizations that, advocated for technological abundance and things like this, that we were going to
right.
solve all the world's problems with
Yeah,
these things.
you're a techno optimist.
I mean, I
Oh,
am,
you
but
wait a minute.
I
It's past tense now. What's going on?
I absolutely am optimistic, but it
Okay.
needs to be applied. It can't just be something that we talk about on stages or we use in respect to, marketing language or buzzwords. It needs to be actually applied. And I guess what I became a little cynical when I would get to the decision point that so many people would not actually um, use things for those purposes.
Hmm.
Now, that's not everyone.
Do you know
And
why? Was it a profit motive? Did capitalism rear its ugly head? I mean, what was the reason why
I think it's
it pivoted?
the incentive model. I'm
Right.
not like I'm very much like capitalist. I'd say, look, I build businesses and I still think
Yeah.
that the model of innovation, entrepreneurship, supporting entrepreneurship is like the lifeblood, at least in the United States, in this country, but
Oh,
also the
absolutely.
world. And though I do think some of the incentive models, perhaps with the approach of startups through, the investment funnel, um, angel VC, exit or private equity, destroying it, something like that. I
Yeah.
don't know if that's necessarily the incentives are appropriately aligned for
Yeah.
people to grow something that is sustainable, scalable, for founders to stay involved, for team to stay involved and not be swapping around, or to build something like we're saying that is not just in the present, but will be necessary in the future. There's so few people that are willing to make a 10 to 20-year sacrifice.
Oh yeah, they're barely willing to make a 4 month sacrifice, like for this quarter, right?
Exactly. So, something that actually allows people to, I would have stayed with any of my companies. I was like, I want to be here for 20 years. And I was a bit
Hmm.
naive. I come from a background of multi-generation, small or medium, like family business, though, like the
Yeah.
mindset of building for a long time. And I think my father in particular thought I was insane when I mentioned taking investment for one of the company. It was like, what? You build a profitable business is
Oh
what
no,
you
no, no, no. We
do.
don't we don't do that here in Silicon Valley. We don't we
Yeah.
don't work we don't work that way.
So again, I think the models, like I would be curious to see in the future as we have new ways of creating organizations or tokenizing ecosystems or aligning shareholders or stakeholders along a mission or longer mission or purpose, that we might see new models of ownership and governance and funding arise. And it's like particularly of interest as Silicon Valley and Washington, right, kind of governance of the country are getting a bit more closely aligned. It's something that I've always advocated for, that startups in Silicon Valley, the Bay Area, really needs to be on the forefront of thinking through new models of governance. And this
Absolutely.
isn't, and really, I've been involved in so many beautiful experiments, but I've not really seen anything start to scale. Um, so yeah, I mean, I'm very much an optimist of in respect to to human ingenuity. And I think that we are for sure going through a shift right now, like a monumental shift on every layer and level of society. That's what my book is about. And of course, when that happens, there's a bit of dismantling. Like things are
There has to
changing
be.
where
There has
we're
to be,
at.
and it's very uncomfortable because people fear change. I mean, that's a base level human trait.
Yeah, I mean, it's most of my job at this point on stages. I'm sent into rooms. There's like 1,000 people there, terrified. And
Oh yeah,
that's what I'm not giving them fear. I don't, no one needs more fear, but
yeah.
I
They already got the
certainly,
fear.
they
The
got
fear's
it.
there.
I am bringing hopefully the optimism and the realism as well. But, yeah, those questions, the very basic questions of like bottom of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, like how will I survive or feed my family or send my kids to college? Like these questions, will my job exist, my company, my industry? Entire industries sitting there thinking, will we exist in the future? And I'm not one to lie to people. So I would never just, if I didn't believe that certain things, I would say absolutely it will.
Hmm.
I don't give it them too hard, being like, no, it won't. Be ready. But help.
But that would be the truth, right?
It is. I mean, I will say it. There is, we all have complex emotions when we hear things that we don't want to believe. But that doesn't mean that there won't be things that will exist that will be necessary, and that the
Yeah,
skills or the competencies of an entire industry would be suited for something else. Maybe it has a different name or a different purpose, but that's
yeah.
just human
Where
progress.
the industry may no longer exist, but the functionality that the industry was providing would be there. Like I've worked with companies that are 200 plus years old. And they go, well, we're going to be around for at least another 200 years. And I was like, no, you're not. You're dead, but you don't realize it yet. You just
Oh
don't
no.
know. You just don't know.
Ye-
They don't see. It's like you have to project when you project into a time frame. You have to see, does this company or does this industry still have a place 10, 20, 50 years from now? And in some cases, you have to say no, but they don't want to hear that. And it's hard to tell them that, and it's hard to convince them of that.
yes, I mean, people go through grief process at
Exactly.
their own pace. I kind of joke. I'm a bit of like a very friendly Grim Reaper, though I'm not. It's more I don't really it's all in good fun, and um I don't think that we could build the future, right? If we're not honest about where we are in the present and what's likely happening,
Absolutely.
and
And you're not
sitting,
telling them because you want to freak them out about their industry dying. You want to give them a guide to making it, rebirthing it in some other form, right? I mean, it's like it might be dying this way, but there's other ways in which it can go that
there's
will allow it to survive.
infinite beautiful possibilities. Again, I
Exactly.
think that writing the book, there is, of course, an acknowledgement that what I've been referring to is just our social operating systems. The structures, again, on all of these levels, inevitably change. And this is not the only time in human history that this has happened.
Hmm.
This is a pattern. We've been here before. Everything changes, we progress. Some things come forward, some things we leave behind. Um, I'm very, for me, I find those moments very exciting. Not to say like in a particularly unstable way, but like thrive in chaotic situations. I
Oh
wouldn't
yeah.
have been a startup founder if I didn't like the idea of doing something and then pivoting if we needed to, or trying an experiment. And I think, when any of us, whether it's in our personal lives with just like kind of personal, professional, or spiritual growth, or it's an organization that you're mentioning is 200 years old, you do become a bit stagnant because it's
Hmm.
comfortable and you do what works. There isn't really an incentive or reason to take risks. And this is one of those moments where it's like risk is necessary.
Yeah.
It's a matter of kind of an existential um, question.
So how do you help people to embrace the change as opposed to fear it?
So this is actually the next book I just finished writing because it was like
See,
I
I'm
it,
ahead of it.
it
I'm ahead
came
again.
it was no well, in writing Radical Next, I was like, okay, all this stuff was coming out of it that was like, well, people need um a little bit more like so what and how it, but not a guide, because this is, again, we're out of the territory of frameworks or methodologies. Not because I have any particular like vendetta against like the 5-step process
Hmm.
to prepare for the future by Sam Rad, TM. No, it it's
The
actually
moment you
there's
put it out, it's obsolete. That's the downside.
that's the thing. We're moving so quickly. And not to just say that you put it out there and then someone with AI copies it, or AI itself, like, digests it and
Digest it. It's
regurgitates.
already there. Yeah.
Yeah. In the singularity, like this post singularity crazy world, it's more just that these proven frameworks cannot be applied to a world where there are constantly converging and diverging different almost realities,
Right.
right? Whether we're talking
Absolutely
about,
different realities. Absolutely.
yeah, I mean, when I first started phrasing it in that way, people thought I was probably a little too psychedelic or something. I was like, oh, we're all living,
Well, do you remember Timothy Leary? Timothy Leary came up with the concept of reality tunnels,
yes,
right? I
yeah.
mean, do you remember that? And I was like, when I read that, I thought that is so true. We are all traveling down our own reality tunnels, and sometimes those reality tunnels converge, and sometimes they run in parallel, but they're never the same. I thought that just blew my mind, that concept, because it's so accurate.
Yeah. I mean, I see them similarly, kind of like bubbles, though, or any sort of thing, though, right? And now we're seeing that play out even more specifically in the material realm with, again, algorithms, right? So your experience of Google, as we know, is different from mine. But
Hmm.
then when someone's experience of the media that they consume or their worldview is completely different. And then it starts to kind of move into our physical or built environment through, technological augmentation of that environment. It starts to get a little funky.
Hmm.
So, my guidance, at least what has worked for me and that what I share will be sharing with others, it's not some sort of super trademarkable magic secret
Did you open source it? Is it open source? No.
It's open, everything is open source. No, it's super simple, right? I mean, the first step I think is connecting first and foremost to our bodies,
Mm,
embodiment, like being present in this. I spent not just saying that we all spend so much time in a virtual environment, it's quite disembodied at the end
absolutely.
of the day. And um I kind of in the next book bring it through what I call the oracles, like the oracle of the body, the oracle of course, like our cognition and mind, emotions, intuition, etc. Going, and this is not necessarily revolutionary,
Mm.
nor is really anything that anyone says. We're all just repeating the same stories throughout human
In
history.
different ways. In different
Right.
ways.
I thought, I'm quite an intuitive individual. So not necessarily a strategic futurist, a bit more like meditate futurist. And no, it felt like the right thing to share at the time as a reminder that the tools are not coming from some sort of thought leader or guru or technological interface or a brain chip in your mind. I
Not
think
yet.
they're to each their own, of what you think that
I
you
don't know. I
need.
wouldn't mind being chipped. And then when you were talking about your deep fake story, and you said it freaked you out a bit. Is it because you had saw a representation of yourself and thought, well, this is crazy? I mean, if I saw a deep fake version of myself that was almost perfect replica, I'd be happy. I'd be like, oh, great! I can move some of my work to this
I
person or
know,
this avatar.
I was not yet at that stage of, let's say, my own like growth or security in the feelings of my own, again, development
Yeah.
to feel okay with that level of making yourself redundant, right? It was
Hmm.
if you're in a fear-based state, like a lot of the people that I work with, right? If your first thought is what will happen to me, my job, to all the people I know, I moved through that quickly. It was a bit of like a unforeseen ego death, quite literally,
Right.
because you're creating this thing that's like not thing, like persona or real. Does it have a consciousness? At what point, it's asking, at least for me, because I tend to ask some pretty big questions that I wish I didn't think about all the time. And it brought up a lot of that for me at this point in time, it's just something that happened. And now everyone has got one and it's
Right.
normal. So it's sort of, I'm thinking, I don't want to do this again to myself with something, but I'm like, what is the next, I'd say, like ontological shock that people will feel? And I don't necessarily need to, well, that is where there's experimentation. If you're mentioning, again, brain machine interfaces or chips, where we then bring the technological interfaces closer to in or on the body. Right now, I've got like five different things. No one's seeing it, but
Yeah.
there's a lot going on here
Yeah.
with
There's
technology.
cameras. There's
Yeah,
screens. There's all this stuff
um,
going on. It's like,
so as we bring this closer to like it's an embodied experience, um, I think there will be the next level of I'd say like, yeah, ontological shock or meta crisis or existential questioning in society. And that can create a fracturing and discord. It can also create really cool things and
yeah.
abundance. And I think the question is how do we navigate it and how do we do it in a way that there isn't some sort of massive divide of people who choose to be like plugged in and the ones that choose not to be.
Right.
Or how do we ensure that the governance and ownership of those systems are managed in such a way that it's not just one person or one company or one government or a handful of governments that own or control that data or what's going in and out of one's mind.
Right. Like it is
Um,
now.
yeah, I
So
mean,
So it's interesting you should mention that because I'm thinking about sort of bypassing the sensorium, right, and going straight
mm,
into the brain, like you're saying. Is it how can we determine that what is reality beyond that? And we're already having trouble with that. We're already having trouble with reality, and then once you get to that point, the question of what is human or what it means to be human becomes super important because does it mean that you're human if you're not augmented, Or does it mean if you're human, if you are augmented, or we will evolve to the point where we need to be cyborgs in order to be human?
I think that is the main question I found myself asking, eh, writing this book, which was what is real and what does it
Right,
mean to be human?
right.
Those are the two overarching questions. And I wrote it in such a way that was Socratic, um, more questions than answers. Because again, I don't think anyone really
Great. So I
has.
won't get any answers out of your book? Come
No, you
on.
will. It's sort of this meandering, question leads to a question, leads to some insight. But
Right.
you know, I mean, it's again, we're moving so far. We haven't even answered the questions of what is consciousness. And we
Mm,
see the debates that happen, let's say bringing it back into the present, or I'm not really one to get involved in like political discussion, but you can see even in certain debates of again, like what is life? When does life start? And my head as a futurist goes to, well, when we have wetware computing, where computers are powered by stem cells and brain cells, which does exist now, what will those debates be in terms of politics or policy, which are not even discussed right now? But
yeah.
yet and if we don't have an agreement or understanding of, again, defining basic things such as consciousness. I think as we move into these more complex realities, we will find more complexity. Um, you make a good point of if the augmented or transhumanist direction, the augmented humans are the further evolved or dominant humans, and let's say like kind of that chain. Um, and as we become multi or interplanetary, I've had some very interesting conversations just with friends, one like this, like musing of if human beings actually were the ones to be creating these colonies elsewhere, not robots with like embedded consciousness, but actually biological forms, they would also probably be augmented to
We would have
adapt.
to be in order to
Yeah,
be able to live and adapt to those
let's
spaces.
say it. And yeah, so at that point, is it a different species? Is it a different line, and do we go into this period, this evolutionary period that of course accelerates because of bioengineering, because of AI, because of quantum computing? We can actually do all this stuff. Does it happen so quickly that we see the emergence of actually a lot of different forms and species, and then it almost gets into fantasy,
Like
right?
split,
When
where we create these splinter races that are designed to live on specific environments or do specific things.
Yeah, I mean, and this is the stuff where I I would say scares me, but
Mm,
it's such because again, we have things like science fiction, which is often quite dystopian, or fantasy, which is a little bit more fun, where we
right.
do have like ways to imagine these kind of different possibilities or realities. But yeah, we're not, I think like that's the next step when we combine these things and get into the bioengineering, because we're still, at least in kind of not in your Silicon Valley area, but the rest of the world or the country is still kind of caught up on the immediate um, impacts, right, of the economy, or still talking about chat GPT or something like
Exactly.
that, of like, wow, all the LinkedIn people are just writing the same woven tapestry still.
I know.
It's um which is really getting annoying. I'm sort of like
Tell me about it. We need a filter for the filters.
it's I'm glad that it's so obvious, but it's also, and as a writer, it's something that for me, when I realized what I could do when I was building a lot of this stuff in early language models and was impressed. But at the end of the day, I still do it. I still
Hmm.
write because I have to,
Yeah.
because it is my human creative expression, amongst other things. And, maybe for some people where that's not their creative expression, then it's fine, right? They don't want to be spending their time like tinkering away with language if that's not what they like to do. For me, I
Yeah.
like to do it. But I don't
What do
want
you
to
think
see it.
I think AI has unlocked the creativity. So people who can't write, but they're still creative, it's allowed them to unlock that creativity that wasn't there before. So it's kind of like YouTube, where the distribution of the creativity wasn't there, and now it's there. So anyone can create. I mean, they create just as much crap as they create good stuff, but it's the same thing with AI. It's unlocked this creativity that's that's behind maybe the skills that they don't have.
I was like, it took me a while to agree with this. So the
Okay.
last chapter in the book is about creativity, and
Hmm.
I do agree with you. But it for me, again, as I worked through probably the emotions or grief cycle that many people are now themselves working through, this fear of replacement, or disintermediation of the creative process. Because creativity, from my perspective, it's more about the process, not the
Mm.
artifact produced. But so I had mentioned I always made film. I wanted to make film. I have a very visual mind and memory. Um, Not to be like I see things, but in the other side of my futurism that I don't often talk about, it was some of my training was more like clairvoyance or remote viewing, some of this woo-woo stuff. Um,
Which is totally interesting. I mean, I think
it is,
that's something that
but
needs to
okay,
be
so
even
here's
dug into
this
more.
very visual mind of mine in the way that it's triggered, the way that it works. I've always wanted to be able to share more directly what I see with people, let's say, see about the future. I became very good at writing because I became good at describing the picture.
Hmm.
However, I would love to just show the picture, and
Right.
especially a motion picture. Now, this was a very expensive thing to do in the past with the equipment or whatever. But as I started, even for this book, and I draw as well, but I'm not like, a very great artist.
Hmm.
Um, I was working a lot for the art and producing a lot of AI art, AI generated art, but based off of, you could call them prompts. I would call them actually quite sophisticated poetry of
Right.
of descriptions of I don't know, images from the ether. And it came through and kind of helped me to communicate that, and then was able, of course, to make these things move
Hmm.
and start to produce animation in ways that concepts that I've wanted to articulate to people for 10 years. Like I have one, my brother's a musician and he made this song many, many years ago. And it like, I feel like I'm transported to a different world. It's
Mm.
crazy. Like I'm channeling something. I don't know what's going on, but I've been like trying to describe it. I was like, I want to make a music video. And then there was a moment when I was actually able to do that.
Nice.
And
You
that
use
was
AI for that.
yeah. And it was actually quite profound, to be able to communicate, right? Because why do we talk, or why do we write things, or why do we create art? Of course, it was to convey these big existential questions and feelings of the human condition, but it's to communicate and like through catharsis.
Exactly.
And yeah, to have that experience, I definitely it changed my own perspective, because at first I was like, this is going to disintermediate creativity. The whole point is the process. And then I realized, well, it's still a tool in a process, and it's actually creating a totally different response if you're using it that way and not just like do this and then done with
Yeah.
it.
And
So,
the other piece is that it's cyclical, right? I mean, you
yeah.
put your prompt in, you get a response, but then that triggers more thinking in you. So it's prompting. It's almost like you're prompting each other. You prompt the AI generates something, but then that generation prompts you to think in other ways. So you go in rounds, and you can create something new together, which is better than the sum of the parts.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's sort of humanity's best way of learning and growing through
Right.
discourse, or it has been traditionally. So it's nice to see an interface that actually is at least to a level where we can work with it in that
Yeah.
way. Um,
Well, using chat as the interface was a brilliant, I think it was a
mhm.
brilliant move because that is how we communicate. That is how human beings communicate through conversation, through interaction.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I'm still amazed. I take breaks from time to time, like technology breaks when I run off into the jungle, like completely. I'm either like very connected or very disconnected. And I think it helps me keep some fresh eyes on things. But
Yeah.
yeah, every time I take a break and then kind of come back into a particular technology or environment or social network or whatever place, I'm amazed at how quickly things are changing.
Oh yeah, absolutely. So let's talk about AGI a little bit. I mean, do you feel that we're on the right path to get to something like AGI, or do you think we still have a long way to go?
No, I mean, well, okay. I don't know. I'm not an expert. Like, I'm just one person who ha built some stuff and certainly don't have like however $20 billion funding every other week to work towards this. I don't know what's going on right
Soon, your next
behind,
startup, your next start.
behind. Let's hope not. I that would be crazy. But I think I don't know, right? My initial
That
impulse
is
was that
probably the most honest answer I've ever heard on the show.
I
I
try
love
to
it.
be honest. Yes, I know exactly how to get to AGI. I
That's
mean, I'm
right.
just
You have the
sitting.
plan. It's right here on your machine.
It could. I mean, I do tinker a lot, and I have some wacky ideas. But there are a lot of really smart people out there working on this. I think they might also be, unfortunately, trapped in a little bit of their own bubble of their own creation. So what
Exactly my
happens with
thinking.
cognition and thinking is that when you start going down, let's say, this reality tunnel, this path, now you can't see anything outside of it.
Yep.
So when I started my first company, for example, because I didn't have a tech background, I was young, naive, like a good founder would be. Um, I didn't
Best
know what
kind.
I didn't know what I couldn't do. I didn't know what was possible or impossible. I built some things that were quite, people still say that's not possible to do today.
Mm,
Like some pretty crazy systems integration stuff and whatever. And I just didn't know. I just kind of was like, we need to do this, so let's go.
nice.
And I think doing this through a large language model, I don't think that these will lead to emergence. So
Exactly.
AGI to me equals emergence.
Hmm.
I do talk about this a little bit in the book as well, but not from the perspective of is it AGI or not. It's more just about esoteric questions about I mean, with the current models, I call it the great flattening. We talked about it a little bit. So you
Hmm.
have this system, and the system is, let's say, a few different systems applied across all of humanity. So via social networks, via chat, whatever. Digesting all this training data and information, it outputs more of that, and then people take that, consume it, and then you have this reversion to the bland mean. So it's called like an average.
Exactly.
Keep putting the average back in, have a model collapse. That to me doesn't lead to emergence. If there is a moment where there's a model collapse and emergence, maybe, but I don't think my feeling is with probabilities and weights and things that are just so like I know math is the language of the universe, of course, but I
Hmm.
think there are certain things in nature. If you spend time really looking at nature, again, when I was like very off grid, let's say the Ecuadorian rainforest or the Amazon, in a square inch, the amount of species and life that exists in the way that it knows how to do everything. I'm like, I don't know if I could map this if I
Yeah.
tried. Or you could use a system. So there might need to be a different approach, and I'm sure people are working on that or thinking through. And maybe the phase we're in right now with LLMs was a stepping stone to get something that was necessary for the next piece. But I don't think what we're seeing currently is necessarily the direct line
Right.
to what would lead
But
to that emergence.
do we even need to get to emergence to build useful things? Probably not, right?
No, I know. I
Yeah.
mean, I think the goal is at that point, it's almost like a vanity metric. It's like
Right.
we've
Oh,
achieved
we made it. We've made it. But by that
artificial.
time, think of all the things we've built up to that point. It's kind of like that's the bright shining star that we're going after, but we're building all these amazing things on the way to get to that.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I'm excited about. I don't necessarily, I guess it's helpful for people to have again um moments in time to, demarcations of
Right.
like here was the before and after. Here was the singularity in this moment. And I think it's actually so ambiguous we probably won't be able to define. We'll have to, history will have to define something as it always does. But yeah, I mean, I agree with you. I don't, it's how I've described my own creative process. We all need a goal or
Hmm.
building a company. You need to be heading towards something.
Right.
When you start heading towards that something, though, the important thing is to have the awareness to know that perhaps that something you were heading towards, you've now had so many forks in the road. Maybe that thing no longer exists anymore or is no
Mm.
longer necessary. Maybe the goal is different now. Maybe we will get far enough on the journey with AI to realize that there is a different purpose to this,
Right.
and it leads us to a new goal. And having the presence and the humanity and the awareness to make that change is important. And I'd say the humility. It's not to say don't build it. It's more just there's probably going to be a lot more that presents itself as well, or it
Absolutely.
presents to us.
Absolutely. So it's time to think like a futurist. It's the year 2035, 10 years from now, since you are a futurist. Where do you think we're going to be in
What
10
is
years? Where do you think we'll be?
that's not too long from
That's
now.
not from us. For us, it's nothing.
That's like
For us,
nothing's
it's
gonna
nothing.
change.
For everybody else, it's like I can't even think about what I'm going to do next week, let alone 10 years. I mean, trying to get organizations to think that far out is almost impossible. At least I found. I don't know about you.
Yeah,
I don't
I'm
know
going
what
to
you.
try to. It is. I mean, I'm on way too. I'm like 50 years out in my head, like 100. Timing
That's why
actually
that's why
for
I had to roll it back. It's like the commercial thing that I pitch to companies is like 10 years and they're like, "Oh my God, that's so far out." But you know, I want to go further. But that's like the best, that's the most I can stomach.
I have a very hard time like framing myself in time because time itself is feels a bit malleable if you're not tracking it. And this was
Oh,
another
absolutely.
weird thing that happened to me earlier in my career. Not to say I was like early in remote work or early, it was just I never really went down a traditional path. So
Right.
was always remote, was always across time zones. My own life has always been self-dictated in terms of my time management and my team's time management. So my concept of time, whether it was entrepreneurial time, which was 24/7, 365,
Hmm.
like what is Saturday? I don't know. Um,
Right.
I think we will
It doesn't
probably
actually exist. That's why I like saying Tuesday does not exist. Saturday does not exist. Those
no,
things do not exist.
they
2
were
p.m. does not exist.
they were yes, or either observed
We-
or invented or
yeah.
quantified, and the systems, time, right? So time is I kind of opened my chapter on work and organizations about that because it is a fairly recent phenomenon that we started tracking time, at least the
Hmm.
Industrial Revolution, in
Absolutely.
the context of work. And different countries do it differently as well. So it's not it shouldn't be shocking for us to move out of it, but there is so imagine all of a sudden in this 10-year time period we're talking about to 2035 that now 90% or more of the population has moved off of some sort of time continuum
Hmm.
because the concept of work, which was keeping time, has changed to the point that we're all now living as these, yeah, individual pockets of collaborators with smaller organizations, right? Or more flexible organizations, or, you might, in terms from today, call that freelance or solopreneurship
It
or
was the Dan Pink
unemployed.
Free Agent Nation from
Yeah,
2002. Remember that?
right.
Yeah.
But that it will happen, right? And I think that's actually going to create a bit of instability. People will, at that point, figure out new ways
A
of
bit?
structuring.
You're
Yeah,
funny.
a little bit. No,
My world is ending
we'll
because I don't have a
restructure.
career path.
Yeah. So we'll see an emergence of new ways of people structuring time around not just kind of career purpose and schedule, but perhaps values or other things. Um, Perhaps around creativity or around passion. Um,
If there's
so again,
models to support that,
there will
there's no
have to
model.
be.
Yeah, there's none yet. I mean, there's some models to support that, but they're very poor, I think.
Well, this is where we get into how do we support, what is kind of the economic or financial, like what is everyone doing and how do they support themselves,
Right.
and how do they eat and all these questions that are very scary to people. Um, I mean we're well underway, right? I think by 2035 we'll certainly see an election somewhere that will consist of either some sort of AI augmented or assisted person. maybe
AI
2032.
AI candidates. I would love to see that actually.
Team human. I wouldn't say like it's going to be a full-fledged, but someone's going to try something. It'll be like
Oh,
one
for
of
sure.
these, or be like, here's my vice president robot.
Well,
y-
somebody tried in some local election and
yeah.
they weren't allowed. They were told, no, you can't run that candidate. And I'm like, why not? It might be one of the least, cannot be bribed, cannot be,
I
who
mean,
knows, right?
this will be like probably a huge, we're in the dismantling phase. And how
Yes.
long the dismantling lasts. And honestly, I, for 10 years, was on stages talking about the breakdown of institutions, and not because I wanted it to happen. It was just something
Yeah.
that I saw and I was
Yeah.
preparing people. And I saw it through the lens of technology, just
But once again, you were
decentralization.
too early. Once again.
Well, I don't want to say I didn't think it would actually happen.
Right.
I just, at some point, I myself kind of fell into my little safe groove of like, okay, I'm talking about this stuff, but it's not going to be like a wholesale sunsetting of humanity's
And
operating
then boom,
system.
here it is.
I'm like shocked. I'm riding the wave as we all are, but I would be lying if I said any of us at this point can foresee what's on the other end of it. But I do
Absolutely.
think so. We're talking 10-year time frame. There's some of that work being done, and then there's the groundwork in parallel that would be set up to create all new systems.
Mm.
Anything from what does the educational systems of the future look like? And they might branch it out to more people are doing, let's say, homeschooling or new models of credentialing with different ways of learning, or there will be still traditional institutions, but valuing different types of skills or knowledge. We see healthcare shifting, and not just of what's available, but also there's a decentralization happening there.
Hmm.
Right. I mean, again, this is another thing. I'm a little bit like the reluctant futurist now with biohacking and all of that. To be
I don't
honest,
see why people have a problem with that. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, natural evolution has gotten to the point where it is, and now it's time for us to evolve ourselves, right?
right. And so
If we can do it, why not try it?
I was a little like dubious about it, but I'm quite libertarian minded. So I'm like, I don't care. It's great. Do whatever you want to your own body
Yeah.
and share the data. And not advocating for human experimentation on others, but if
No.
people want to do stuff to themselves, like for example, I found stuff in my life that keeps me happier and more radiant. The very simple things. And I thought it was excessive. From time to time, I'll get like IV fluids and vitamins because I'm on the road speaking. And I'm like, okay, technically, I kind of like biohack a little bit.
That's right.
Um,
And there's nothing wrong with that. I mean,
no, I mean, I want to feel good. And also, if you do it in a way that feels more natural, like the best I've ever felt in my life was living in the middle of the jungle, drinking spring water and eating like bananas from the trees. But let's
yeah,
be real.
supernatural.
Yeah, not most of us can do that. So I think again, so we're looking at the food systems changing, the healthcare systems, and a lot of what prevented that from changing, even though we had technologies over the past 10, 20 years, was either the financial incentives, the economic business model side, or the
Yep.
regulatory. Again, I'm not like anti-regulation. We need to do things safely, but there was so much ridiculous stuff that kind of held us back. And I
Yep.
think we'll probably see um, some reform there that will actually allow things to happen, and hopefully not for a reason that is like how the pandemic accelerated the mRNA vaccines
Mm.
because they were like we need to just do this and like let's not mind. I think I think we'll see again opportunities for more of these new frameworks, but by 2035 it's like, are we in flying cars yet or any of these things? Maybe in China they
Flying
are.
cars should have been here in the 2020s. Come
Yeah,
on.
it
I mean,
should have. I mean,
it's
we'll
like,
probably see. I mean, we're moving from a geopolitical perspective as well into this like multipolar world. So, like everything as well. And it is a touchy subject. The lines on the map also change
mhm.
throughout human history. That is just like a fact. And the global order, post World War II order has been shifting for quite some time. And so we're in that. I think we'll probably see kind of new alliances and superpowers arise, we're already kind of well underway. AI and quantum computing and chips and energy is a big part of that. So
Yeah, I mean, as long as we're using all of this to sort of improve humanity and do better for ourselves, become better humans, I think it's all good, right? As long as we're using it in for those purposes.
I am team human, however
Yeah.
that looks. And that doesn't mean I'm
Team
anti
humanity, rah rah
team
rah.
human.
It's true.
Right. It is. I mean, when people ask, like, they'll like start digging, like, so what is it that you stand for? And I'm like, I just team human. It's as simple and it usually resonates. And then again, it's not anti, I don't think there's going to be some colossal split of like the transhumanist or like robots versus human, Terminator future.
Yeah. No, but I think
I think
that's where transhumanists are. They're in this space where they want to augment themselves to be better humans. They don't want to become robots. Well, maybe some of them do,
it's
but
not
I think
my
in general,
business what people want to do with their life and their body. And I think
yeah.
this is where we should unite on that. It's, are there certain things I would do or not do? Sure.
Hmm.
Is it?
But it's your choice. I
It
mean, for
is. I
your
mean,
body, absolutely.
as
Yeah.
long as it's a choice and someone's not coming around being like, you have not gotten the
Yeah, you need the
mandatory
chip.
brain chip and payment chip in your hand. I think this is where, and there are ways to do this right with soft power. It wouldn't necessarily be some sort of top-down thing. I would imagine it would just emerge in the same way. I talk about cybernetic enhancement,
Yeah. That is our
which has
cybernetic
been
advancement today.
annoying the heck out of me, buzzing over here. And and it's giving me some dopamine, like it's doing something. I should
Yeah.
have silenced it and was like, we already opted into that.
Yeah.
No one forced that on
Yeah.
us. And yet I'd say, what, Gen Z, so younger generation, spending 8 hours a day on the phone. It's, and most of us as well, for
Yeah.
doing things
Yeah.
like this
Well, I mean,
in
as
the
far as I'm
work.
concerned, we're already cyborgs. I mean,
Absolutely.
they've taken electronics away from people, and they've just sat in a room, in a darkened room, in a state of disarray for hours because they're not connected to the rest of the world. So we've already become cyborgs. We don't need actual implants. We're there.
Yeah. I mean, that again, it happened probably around the time of these, but as I also wear the in-ear monitor, the earbuds, and
Yeah.
any of the
Yeah.
other augmentation. And again, when I'm walking around, normally in Brooklyn and New York, you would like the amount of people that are plugged into their own world, their reality bubble, and they're talking to someone else. This would have looked like people were talking to themselves, in a different time. I sometimes think if I had like time traveled from a different era, what that would look like. And then also
Yeah.
but in the future, we won't even probably talk. It'll be purely telepathic.
Hmm.
And by telepathic, I mean more of the technological telepathy, not the
So
metaphysical telepathy.
The AIs will translate our brainwaves somehow
Yeah,
to be
and
able to
this is where
communicate.
I get nervous because and again, probably will out myself a little bit in the esoteric side of things because I do think that there are probably fields of study or science that we will start to learn more about, let's say in the next 10 years. And this is probably going to come about because of quantum computing.
Hmm.
And it will
Which I
probably
can't figure out yet.
yeah.
I gotta be
I
honest.
mean, so when you sit there and you say, okay, it's cool. So we're just completely changing the concept of bits and bytes and binaries and superposition exists. And
Hmm.
that's how we're going to make these super powerful computers. If you stop and think about it for a second, how insane that is. And that
Yeah.
completely is against classical physics. I mean, it is the
Yeah. We're
next.
throwing it out.
So
We're getting
yeah.
classical things
So
out
when
the door.
I'm like, AI is cool, but like, can we talk about, and I was always into like the more metaphysical quantum mechanic type stuff. But I do think this is sort of when science via technological progress, whether you're talking about asking what is consciousness or humanity because of biotechnology, or if we're talking about what is reality and time because of quantum physics, these breakthroughs are happening. So I do believe that there are things that'll come out where we'll realize the human body is probably more powerful than we are aware of, which I think is cool and I'm passionate about, which is why I'm not particularly one to rush into all the cybernetic enhancements. I prefer to see what this can do, this instrument can do, and maybe biohacking. That's why so many people are into it, because they're really starting to unlock potential in the biological form without necessarily augmenting it in a different way. But no, I mean, some of even the trademarks you're talking about, I think Meta has one of these trademarks, and now recently one of the products for the Neuralink, they're both kind of calling it telepathy, which would just be a direct patent, brain machine interface to brain machine interface link, and it would need some sort of AI translation in between, whether it's doing direct brain waves or it's able to map thought forms. So again, now I've shared that I'm mostly, let's say, a visual thinker. Maybe you think differently. I don't know how you think, like right? We're all different. So, but like you've got your own specific sort of system.
Yeah, and it'll communicate in the way that your best.
Yeah, you'll probably
your best way to communicate. Yeah.
Receive it. It'll send, the output. The right will be.
Yeah, I'll send it my way. It'll translate it, and it'll send it to your way.
Yeah, I might receive some pictures from you and whatever. My question with that is like, because that's probably how it is working or will work, and I've seen some startups that are already using AI. I mean, I'm dubious when I see these things, because like, it's so cool. We're mapping your brain waves to show your dreams to you the next morning. And I'm like, what are you really doing? And people buy the stuff because it's cool. And I'm like getting all paranoid. But no, that's training data for probably something like this. Or at least if I saw if an investor, right, they're like saw what their roadmap is. And my question there is like, if that's gonna that's an inevitability, at least in my mind, like that's gonna happen probably soon. Who's building it? What is the training data? How do we know that the people who've like created these translations from like what a symbol in my brain, maybe I see a white rose, and that means things to people in human history, different people, different things. It might mean different things to me. How do we make sure that then that is translated appropriately in terms of the meaning behind something, and then received, right? Yeah. And this is like these are pretty big questions. So
because once you have humans in the mix, there's always the possibility of bias that the translation will go wrong.
Yeah, right? But I mean, language and communication is probably one of humanity's most fundamental inventions. And everything has really stemmed from that. So it'll be interesting to see how we continue to progress in terms of the ways that we do connect. And the reason I thought of it is just because then we'll move out of this era from walking with our earbuds and talking to ourselves or other people on the street,
and we'll just be thinking. We'll be thinking it to each other instead.
Might be very silent. And then I wonder with evolution.
Quiet is good. Quiet is good.
I don't mind it, but will we still have use of our sensory interfaces, like our human sensory? We'll
do it for fun. It's kind of like like eventually when we have autonomous vehicles, driving will be for fun, right? And speaking will be for fun. And
well, you can think that far out though with like evolution. That's a great point of if we stop speaking, do our jaw muscles become weaker? Do we not
we
have
still
a mouth?
We still need to eat, right? Unless of course we figure out other ways of eating, and then maybe our vocal cords will shrivel up because we won't be speaking anymore.
Yeah,
anything could happen.
I mean, it could, but we'll certainly accelerate these things. Again, and that's on the bioengineering side, and that is AI plus quantum plus bioengineering. We will have the compute to run those simulations. So again, making myself redundant as some futurist who has like one or two whimsical ideas like this, it'll be like, okay, cool, let's do 100,000 whimsical ideas and run that simulation of every possible evolutionary path if we make that decision. And then I would just hope that we then listen to the output of again those simulations.
I love it. We absolutely have to do that. Well, this has been great. I mean, we could go on for hours, but I think So if somebody wants to get in touch with you, what's the best way?
Yeah, I'm I'm all on the interwebs still as Sam Rad
A series of
official.
tubes, apparently. A series
Yes,
of tubes.
you can find me. I made it consistent so that it's easy. So I'm Sam Rad, R-A-D, and it's Sam Rad Official. And my book is called Radical Next: Reclaiming Your Humanity in a Post-Human World.
I love it. I love it. I'll put all the information in the show notes so people can go direct. And I'm going to go buy your book right now.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. This has been great. Talk to you soon.
Thank you. See you.
Bye.
Pixels and philosophies merge and mold, a future untold, unseen.